They went across the country and got their education in urban planning, and then attend all these conferences and work for clients nationally. And they wondered how they could bring all those cutting-edge philosophies that are going on around the country back to Maine. And so 5 years ago, in their free time, with a lot of phone calls and begging a lot of favors and running their credit cards, they started building from scratch in the mill down the hill at Lewiston. And so 5 years later, we have 75 people registered today and 300 registered for tomorrow. And I would say it's a raging success to start out just a brainstorm on their part. The notion is to bring cutting-edge philosophies and technologies to Maine to start conversations of how we can advance the notion of urban planning and community revitalization. I am Robert O'Brien from the Maine Downtown Center. We are housed at the Maine Development Foundation. Maine Downtown Center has been around for coming up on 20 years. We are the statewide coordinator of the National Main Street Center, which started the 4-point approach, which is a business model or a strategic plan for downtown revitalization that's grounded in historic preservation. We have 27 communities in the state of Maine that are either nationally certified, accredited as Main Streets, or they are network affiliates. Just a quick show of hands, who is from one of those communities today? Great. If you keep your hands up for 1 second, I'm going to actually have you call out what community you're from, if you could. Start from the side and just call her out. Colby, go ahead.
Belfast, Maine.
Belfast, Maine.
Corey.
Main Street. Bath, Maine. Westbrook.
Awesome.
Brunswick.
Brunswick. Brunswick.
Bath.
Bath.
All right. Good. Thank you. We want to thank our sponsor very quickly, Bank Savings Bank Developers Collaborative, Central Empowerment, that's Associates. We've had a lot of help from sponsors this year in underwriting to keep this going. We want to thank the Lewiston Public Library, who has donated this lovely space here today. They've been a major lift in getting this going. And we're going to do a quick run through of the itinerary. We're going to start with the workshop, Retail in Their Internet Age. I'll introduce Bob Gibbs in just a moment. And then we have a retail panel with 2 rock star retailers. We'll have a quick break at 10:55, and then we're going to run right into the second workshop called Landing Impactful Public Art, where art professionals talking about strategies for building a professional arts program in your city and places to find funding. We're going to have an hour for lunch in downtown Lewiston, and then we have a terrific workshop this afternoon on tactical urbanism called Creating Value with Unlocked Spaces. And then at the end of the day, where you'll find me is there's a beer garden just down the street at 5 Canal Street Alley. It's literally just down the hill from the front door. There'll be food trucks, live music, and of course beer. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Bob Gibbs. When I met with Karen and Vanessa and told them I was trying to put a workshop together on retail, they said that Bob Gibbs was on their dream list to bring to Maine, that he is a rock star nationally, and that we are thrilled to have him in Maine here today. Bob has been consulting for at least 25 years in over 400 town centers on retail strategy. He was part of Michigan, the state of Michigan's first 10 new urban communities and building reform-based codes. He was a speaker at the first Congress of New Urbanism in 1992 and has presented at 8 subsequent conferences. He's the author of Principles in Urban Retail Planning and Development and the Smart Code Retail Module. For the past 20 years, Bob has taught urban retail planning at the Executive Education Program at Harvard Graduate School. And then finally, Bob gained invaluable expertise in retail planning by advising shopping center developers on the psychology of commerce, the practical science of analyzing and adjusting all elements known to affect a shopper's mood in the marketplace. And that's really Bob's expertise and what sets him apart from other consultants. We're very thrilled to have him here today, and we are going to start the presentation now. So welcome, Bob.
Our practice is geared around making downtown retail profitable and sustainable. We believe that every square foot of successful retail that you have in your downtown is one less suburban sprawl per square foot that's going to be out in the suburbs. So we're about building sustainable retail in downtowns. As a part of this, your conference, I'm offering all attendees 6 months of free consulting by email. This is my email address, and I welcome you to send me photos, send me questions that you have about your downtown. There's no charge for that at all. I travel about 200 days a year, and it keeps me busy when I'm stuck in my hotel room by myself at night. So please, I look forward to hearing from you. Also, I have an institute, my company is Gibbs Planning, but I have an institute called the Urban Retail Institute, and every day we post free articles, free research about retail. I think you would find it worthwhile if you're a Facebook person to follow the Urban Retail Institute on Facebook. We post a lot of research. We believe in downtowns. We think the best way of stopping sprawl is to make it more profitable to be in downtowns. And it's important to understand what kind of town you are. Are you a hamlet, a village, a town, or a city? Every one of these has specific design standards and performance standards. Each place, each city or town or hamlet has 4 primary uses: civic, residential, employment, and retail. A hamlet may look like this. A village may look like this. It has freestanding buildings. A town has attached buildings. They tend to be 2 or 3 stories tall. And a city, of course, is much taller and much denser. It's important to understand which of these categories you're in, because the form of the building should follow the setting that you're building in. Residential in a village or town tends to look like this. Residential in a town or city tends to look like this. Residential in cities tends to be taller, 5 stories or higher. And then, of course, residential in suburbs tends to be sprawled out. Suburban residential tends to have front-loaded garages. These are not appropriate in towns or villages or hamlets, and you shouldn't allow front-loaded garages if you're one of those uses. The suburbs build mostly Bigfoot houses or attached apartments with front-loaded garages. These are proving to be unsustainable. Experts say that by 2030, these large bedroom homes will deflate in value by 30% because the millennials and the empty nesters are not interested in this sort of format any longer. Retail in a village or a town very often is a converted house that's been converted into a shop. Very often it's freestanding. In a city, of course, it's attached, and it tends to have a much more polished storefront. Very often in a city, you'll see national chains. In a large city, the retail right now is going very mid-century modern. This is what the high fashion retailers like to build, are storefronts that are reflecting the architecture of the 1960s. This would be inappropriate in a village or a hamlet or a town. The suburban retail tends to be large, big box retail with large parking lots. As you know, this sort of form would be completely inappropriate in a village or a hamlet or a town. Civic buildings tend to be white, and they tend to have oversized windows, and they tend to be located in the most prominent place of the town, either the hilltop or the corner or the terminating of the street. A civic building in a city or town is very different than a civic building in a village or a hamlet. This would look totally inappropriate in a small village, but it's very appropriate in a major city. Same with civic art. The right-hand sculpture would be very appropriate in a village or a town, but it would be totally inappropriate, of course, in a city. Same with little details like fences and benches. You can see each of these fences has its own place, its own character, but they would be inappropriate if they were swapped in another location. I say this because we face a lot of towns that are pretending to be cities, or a lot of cities that are pretending to be villages or hamlets. And it really confuses people when they go there, and it really doesn't reinforce the brand. This sort of bench is perfectly appropriate in a village or a hamlet. In a city, this would be more appropriate, and this bench would look totally out of place in a historic hamlet or village. Same with street trees. I'm a landscape architect, and there's a tendency right now for all cities to install the same 3 street trees. They're all installing honey locust, Bradford pears, and crab apples. And while these are appropriate in some locations, they really don't reinforce the historic character. Historically, cities use horse chestnuts, oaks, sugar maples, and we feel to be competitive, we should go back to the traditional trees that American cities installed. Recent research indicated that street trees increase retail sales by 12 to 20%, and they increase price elasticity or price flexibility by 12%. In other words, people will be willing to pay up to 12% more for the same product if you have a downtown full of mature street trees. It makes people feel more comfortable with higher prices. A park, all towns and villages and hamlets should have a park, but it should be designed for the scale of your setting. Now, there are strategic and tactical practices that you can do to increase sales in the retail climate of your downtown. And what our firm is really about is, besides the design of the place, is that we want the place to have high sales. We want your retailers to earn enough money so that they can make a living off of their storefront. And there are tactical things you can do and strategic things you can do. First is, of course, to have a working master plan or a form-based code. This is a form-based code we wrote for Marquette, Michigan. Form-based codes predict what types of buildings you have, where they're located on the site, the size of the windows, the heights, details, setbacks, etc. Form-based codes have become widely preferred by developers wanting to locate in cities. They like the fact that what they're allowed to build is perfectly illustrated and everybody understands that they have the predictability of what they're going to build. This is my city, Birmingham, Michigan. We did a form-based code for them in 1996. The city was a town at the time, and they wanted to grow to be a city, and they only allowed 1-story buildings. And the developer said they needed 5-story buildings, so we got 5-story buildings permitted, which is appropriate for a city, as long as they look like 4-story buildings who set back the upper level. This is a form-based code up in northern Michigan, a little town called Walloon and Interlochen, where we just did a basic plan, illustrated what it would look like, and then we're able to change it from this to this in about 2 or 3 years. Here's the plan, here's the little diagram sketch. We think it's important to hire good artists when you do your plan. And then this is what it changed to, and this was a little hamlet that wanted to grow to be a village. And it recently just had a little inn, a track there. The inn, a developer told us they went to this location, even though it's very rural, because they had a plan and they knew exactly what they wanted to look like. And he bought into it, and he designed the inn to look like what the plan had illustrated. It's also important to do market studies to understand how much retail is supportable in your town, if any at all. You shouldn't necessarily just assume that if you plan it, people are going to come and shop there. And a good market study will tell you how many square feet are supportable by category and what the sales will be. This is a market study we did in Florida, and we found that this town could support 83,000 square feet of new retail, and it would generate $26 million a year in sales, and it included things like the 7,800 square foot grocery store was supportable. A detailed market study should tell you by category what's supportable. In this case, we said you could support 6,100 square feet of apparel stores, generating $290 a square foot per year. 20 to 25 stores were supportable, generating in 5 years $303 a square foot per year. It's important for you to understand what the trade area is, how far are people currently coming down to your downtown, and how far potentially could people come to go to your village center. and what kinds of goods and services they would want. By knowing this, you can then fold a master plan around what you want from the supportability of supportable retail. If, for example, in this case, we found the town could support 320,000 square feet of retail, they told us, no, we don't want to be that big. So they wrote a zoning code to restrict the amount of retail that could come into the downtown, because we told them the market would likely build 300,000 square feet, and they said, no, we'd like to only have about 50,000 square feet of additional retail, and so they wrote a code around it. We recently did a code for a city and said that they could support a 22-screen cinema, and they said, oh my God, I don't want a 22-screen cinema, and they changed the zoning code only to allow a 2-screen cinema or smaller. Office workers are very important. We estimate that every office worker directly supports 25 square feet of retail per worker. This is a fact from the Urban Land Institute and the International Council of Shopping Centers. So you have 1,000 office workers, they directly support 25,000 square feet of retail and restaurant space. Shoppers love to shop while they go on vacation. Tourists. When tourists go on vacation now, the number one thing they do with their time is shop. Tourists spend more time going into stores than they do going to recreational activities. And when tourists shop, they're not just buying souvenirs anymore, they're not just buying ashtrays, they're actually buying the goods and services that they need when they go back home. Surprisingly, when people go on vacation, they like to shop at the same stores they shop at home. This is a shock. People will travel across the country, and if they shop at Talbot's at home, they like to shop in Talbot's while they're on vacation. The only difference is, while on vacation, they want the store to look different on the outside than it does in their local shopping center. And that makes them feel like the Talbot sweater will be slightly different on the one they bought on vacation than they want to buy at home. We did a lot of research for Disney, and we were very surprised that when people go to Disney and they go to resorts, that the number one thing they do now with their time is shop. Anchors are very important if you want to have a sustainable downtown. Historically, downtowns were filled with anchors. They had 5 and dime stores, department stores, furniture stores, car dealers, grocery stores. Downtowns used to be the center of commerce, and historically, up until 1960s, downtowns captured 70 to 80% of the total market share. Today, downtowns only capture 2 to 5% of the total market share. That other 80% is going out to the suburbs. Downtowns always had department stores, and department stores brought people, thousands of people to the downtown, and then they would go shopping and they would go to the shoe stores and the other stores. Department stores right now are returning back to the downtowns. Department stores, as you know, are leaving the malls, they're going out of business, and the new department stores like Target and Kohl's and what we call big box retail are now shrinking their stores and they're relocating back into downtown. Target will be opening 200 small stores in downtowns across the country in the next 3 years. If you have more than 30,000 square feet of retail, you really need to have an anchor. It's not sustainable to have 50 or 60 or 80,000 square feet of retail without an anchor. And one of the major reasons that shopping centers fail is that they lose their anchors. Grocery stores make excellent anchors. A grocery store in your downtown would increase the retail sales by 25% across the board for all of your other stores. And so when developers build shopping centers, the first anchor they want to attract right now is a grocery store, especially a gourmet grocery store. There's something called the Starbucks effect. A Starbucks or a quality coffee shop increases home prices by 12% within those that can walk to it within a 5-mile walk. And even Whole Foods, a gourmet grocer, will increase home values by up to 20% if you can walk to a gourmet grocer. These are called the Starbucks effect or the Whole Foods effect. Right now, there are investors that find out where Starbucks is opening its next coffee shop, and they buy every house they can within a 5-minute walk of that place. Public markets make excellent anchors. Public markets are farmers markets that are open 7 days a week. And they sell produce, baked goods, cheese, meats, prepared foods. And these sorts of markets make excellent anchors. They will become your #1 tourist attraction in downtown, and they also make it more sustainable to build housing, and they will support the retail by increasing sales by about 25%. This is the farmers market or the city market in Charleston, South Carolina. A great model for a public market is in Napa, California. It's called the Oxbow Market. It's about a 25,000 square foot market, and it is recreating downtown Napa because of this market. Another great anchor is in a movie cinema or entertainment. These are especially good for the restaurants and the coffee houses and the bookstores and art galleries. Cinema does not really directly help retail, but they help all other categories. Post offices make excellent anchors. Most of the downtowns had post offices at one time, and many downtowns have suffered when the post offices left. This is a post office in downtown Savannah, built in a very nice historic building. Libraries are awesome anchors. An average library brings about 1,200 visitors per day. Most of them tend to be young families, and it's very great in Lewiston to see the library not only being downtown, but having its front door right on the Main Street. This sort of institution is something that all of you should seek to attract back into your downtowns if possible. Playgrounds also make excellent anchors. They bring downtowns on a regular basis. It's a non-commercial anchor, and it can be as effective as commercial anchors. Business recruitment. Retailers do not necessarily just drive along your Main Street, write down a space that's for rent, and call to try to do a deal. You have to go out and recruit retailers to your downtown. There's about 6 urgent steps to do that. The first is to canvass the retail and brokers in your community, participate in the ICSC and ULI deal-making events, seek retailers, seek local, regional, and national retailers, and you have to canvass the properties and create a database to determine what is available in your downtown, what's the asking rent, engage property owners to see what they're willing to do. Are property owners willing to sign 5 or 10-year leases? Are they willing to make improvements to the space? And then establish a database, and then either retain a local broker, do the business recruitment in-house, or retain an out-of-town consultant. We do a lot of business recruitment for downtowns, and we will, the first thing we will do is we'll subscribe to this service called Plain Vanilla Shell. Plain is something you can subscribe to very inexpensively. In Plain Vanilla Shell, you write down your demographics, whether you want what kind of retailer you're looking for, and then it pulls out a list of all of the regional and national retailers that have said they want to locate in your region and in downtown, and they'll tell you what size and what they're willing to pay for rent. You can also attract businesses by going to the leasing shows. The International Council of Shopping Centers, the ICSC, sponsors leasing shows. You can walk around with a plan and photos of your city, and you can go right up to the booths. You can go up to the sporting goods stores, the shoe stores, the restaurants and stuff, and just make a pitch for your downtown. You can do this directly on your own, or you can hire a representative to do that for you. The technical practices. How do you increase retail in your downtown from a technical level? You have to do lots of little things at a very minor scale. This is a little town in Cape Cod, and this store owner got the city to paint the crosswalks to go directly to their front door. So when you cross the street, suddenly you have an urge to buy a gift. It's totally brilliant. And I was trained in the shopping center. I'm an urban planner and landscape architect, as I said earlier. I was trained in the shopping center industry where I worked for a mall developer 35 years ago, and we would use time-lapse photography and study the way you behave in a shopping setting. And then we would move things around, and we learned how to manipulate you in a mall. We learned how to make them go right. I know how to make somebody turn left. I know how to make them go fast. I know how to make them slow down. You're totally manipulated in a mall, and we just apply that science now to downtowns so that we sort of manipulate the way people walk the downtowns, where they pause, where they go fast, where they go slow. One of the best things you can do to have high retail sales is to implement historical design standards. The better retailers right now only want to locate in villages and towns and cities that have high standards, because they will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on their store. They will make their store look really nice, but they want the predictability that eventually the other stores on the street will be built to a high standard. If you think you can attract retailers by having low standards, you're mistaken. The better retailers right now will actually come to your planning commission in secret and observe you for a few meetings to see how flexible and how easy you are. If you're too easy, they will go to another community. They love this sort of standard where you tell them how much glass is required, what kind of sign is allowed, what kind of colors are allowed to be painted. The more that you can restrict them and have a high standard, the better retailer you will get. You don't, and you should not look like a modern downtown. The better retailers right now like historic buildings like this. They like it when you require sign bands and require certain colors on the storefront. And shoppers will pay more for a product if it's designed in sort of historical building. They will feel like they're getting a better value and that they're getting better quality. So we have found that when storefronts are painted a dark gloss color, and when you have things like flower boxes and awnings and nice sign bands, that you will generate higher retail sales and you will have more traffic in the store. If you allow modern strip center storefronts in your downtown, then you're really lowering the expectations for the shopper. You should not allow anodized aluminum storefronts like this. You should not allow tinted glass or reflected mirror glass. This will eventually lower the retail sales, it will lower the traffic to your downtown, and eventually it may make your downtown unsustainable. The better retailers like and will invest in beautiful storefronts like this if you require it, especially if you require clear glass. This is a new shopping center in Storrs, Connecticut, and it's a mixed-use town center, and this is typical of what developers are doing. They make every storefront a handcrafted wood storefront for business reasons. You can do a lot with just paint and signage. These are the basic standards that you should be implementing in your downtown. You should require an 18-inch sign band. It's nice to have the glass surrounded with the storefront. You should require 70% clear glass. It's nice if the door is open. You'll get twice the traffic if the door is open when you can. And then you should allow outdoor displays. Handcrafted signage is really valuable. Your signs, you should allow A-frame signs, and only if they're designed as a handcrafted sign rather than a plastic sign you buy at Costco. You should allow projecting signs like this, but they shouldn't be allowed to be more than 6 square feet, and they should be handcrafted. We like to see 3-dimensional signs, and we allow the sign to be larger in size if it's a 3-dimensional sign. It's also nice to have pinned-on letters instead of just using a vinyl letter on the storefront to require pinned-on letters. Pop-up shops are a very effective way of increasing retail in a small village or hamlet. This is what we did in northern Michigan. These are pop-up shops that we designed. This is a hamlet of a population of 310 people. It's in the middle of nowhere, and we could not, in the market study, we couldn't find the demand for any retail at all. So instead, we built these pop-up shops. These are just 25 pop-up shops together, and as a unit, 25 of these little shops together. We went out and found people that make crafts and arts in their homes. We did the interiors and then putting shipping containers around to create pop-up shops. These are some shipping containers in Arizona that have just done that. It's not very expensive to do, and you can create a lot of interest, and you can create a nice trade area with these pop-up shops. You should encourage shallow retail so that you can have small, especially in rural areas, if you can have small retailers in the 100 to 300 or 400 square foot range, you can create those with shallow, lighter buildings, and lighter buildings can be used to hide parking lots. Here's the parking lot, here's the main street, and the lighter building hides the retail, hides the street. Walkability is the new buzzword that retailers are looking for. They use something called the walk score. You probably have heard of the walk score. They use this to determine where to open stores right now. A walk score is an app on your iPhone or your Android. You can download the program, and you can stand anywhere in the United States and push a couple of buttons, and it'll rate the walkability of your location from 1 to 100. The better retailers right now are looking for highly walkable areas because that's where millennials like to spend their time. I found that Lewiston's walk score is 89. That's very high, 89 out of 100. The better retailers and the better real estate investment companies right now are only investing in places that have a walk score of 75 or higher. That's the new cutoff point right now. And so if you should find your walk score. If you have a high walk score in your village or town, you should promote that on your website that we have a walk score or whatever. 89 is extremely high, and it measures things you can walk to like libraries and post offices and grocery stores. The Brookings Institute found that when you have a high walk score, that home sales are 25% higher, rents are 47% higher, office rents are higher. Sales tend to be about 40% higher with a high walk score. There is an economic value of having high walk scores. There's something that we call the X factor in placemaking. And the X factor is when you have a built environment, when you have a downtown that people fall in love with. And when you create an emotional connection between yourself and the built environment. And you can achieve the X factor with just lots of little details like landscaping and window boxes, outdoor display, and well-designed storefronts. People will spend more time in places that have the X factor, and retail sales will go up by as much as 50% if you have a really strong X factor. You can achieve an X factor with old-fashioned neon signs. And there are now shopping center developers that are going around the country and buying up neon signs and putting neon signs in their new town centers. Of course, you have the X factor if you have independent retailers. You cannot have the X factor with all national chains, and we recommend that you really try to limit, if you have national chains, that you try to limit them to no more than 25 or 30%. You can have the X factor with beautifully designed storefronts. This is a coffee shop in a little Michigan town, and they had an artist design a storefront. And artists are great for the X factor. Here's a little town in Connecticut that had an artist design signage for each of the retailers. And this is a steel sign designed to look like a paper handbag. And so this town hired an artist to help them with creative signs for each of the storefronts. That contributes to the X factor. We would encourage you to try to achieve the X factor. Put in flower pots, put in window boxes in front of the store windows, put in nice signage. Try to achieve the X factor as much as possible. Now, the business side of retailing is that in order to be sustainable, a small store should generate $1,000 a day in retail sales. If you really want to pay yourself a living wage, the store should have sales at least of $320 a square foot per year. If you're a downtown manager, you should know what the sales are in your downtown. We recommend that you somehow try to keep track of those sales, maybe have the retailers report to an out-of-state CPA firm, but somehow we should understand the sales, because rents should not be any more than 8% of your sales. A lot of people say our rents are too high, and as a rule of thumb, your rents should only be 8% of your sales. The small retailers that we work with only have sales of $85 a square foot per year on average. That's not sustainable. If you're only producing $85 a year in sales per square foot, then you're probably not paying yourself a salary. The average sales for the average shopping center in the U.S. is $275 a square foot per year. The average independent retailer that we work with only produces sales of $80 a square foot per year. The highest shopping center developer in the country, their malls produce $950 a square foot per year. Extraordinary number. The average Apple store produces sales of $5,000 a square foot per year. If you have an Apple store in your shopping center, Wall Street will not let you include them in your average sales because they skew it so much. The Apple store in New York City has sales of $66,000 a square foot per year, and that's in a 10,000 square foot basement. Extraordinary number. The little resort town of Seaside, Florida, a little town of about 300 people, has sales of $1,100 a square foot per year, and they do that in 3 months. You don't necessarily have to be a 12-month downtown to be sustainable. In fact, everywhere in the United States, everybody has at least one bad quarter. But you can achieve sustainable sales as a resort or in 2 or 3 months if you can hit the $300 minimum goal. Visual merchandising is the science of making your store attractive enough to get people into your store and to spend time shopping there. There's a rule called the 8-second rule. It takes 8 seconds to walk past the normal storefront. You have 4 seconds before you reach the front of the store, and you only have 1.5 seconds for somebody to read the window display and decide to turn into your storefront. If your storefront is too cluttered, if the window's dirty, if you've got posters stuck to the glass, then you will lose that 1.5 second window of opportunity. This is the typical science of a store. They have something called the front and center table. When you walk into the store, they have something called the decompression zone, where there's nothing for the first 2 steps in the store because you're confused when you walk into the store. And then they expect you to turn right. In North America, 9 out of 10 people turn right when they walk into the store, and they tend to walk counterclockwise. And there's something about this color of red. When merchandise is in a red box or when you have red in the store, it causes a chemical reaction in your brain that makes you want to buy something. So you'll see a lot of this color of red in stores. This is the basic science of a store layout. People will be attracted into the store by the front and center table. 9 out of 10 Americans turn right. This is the decompression zone where you don't want anything at all. And then in the store, you want people to walk in a counterclockwise motion. You want them to walk around the outside of the store, and you put the most profitable merchandise in the middle of the store, so that when they walk around, you always put the cash register on the right. So they walk around, they walk past the highly profitable merchandise in the middle. You do not want to have a store that's a cul-de-sac where you walk up and down the aisle in the same place. This is a small front and center table for a small store. It has what they call a lifestyle prop, an antique on the table, and it has this. This is the most important tool right now to increase sales, is to have something on sale. The shoppers today expect to see at least 5 things on sale when they walk into your store, and they want it to be the good stuff that's in season. They don't want to buy stuff on sale that nobody wanted to buy last year. It has to be the good stuff, and the on-sale merchandise needs to be covered around the store. This is a classic front and center display. You can see the antique here. For some reason, American flags increase retail sales in inside stores, and then you can see the merchandise propped around the storefront. This science can be applied to small independent retailers. You can borrow from what the large retailers do to your small store. This is a small independent store we work with in California, and we had them install the man chair. It's important to have chairs for the spouse to sit and rest while the other spouse is shopping. If you can get the man out of the way, if you can get him to sit down and relax and read a manly magazine, then the spouse can have more time to shop without him looking at his watch and saying, "Let's go home, honey." Retailers use awnings as a gimmick to get you up to the window. People like walking under awnings, and so the retailers put awnings on their stores to bring you up to the glass and to bring you closer to the front door. By the way, the new awnings have no side on them. The new look in awnings is they have no side, and they make the awnings out of a material that looks like canvas. If you have storefronts like this in your downtown, then you're telling the visitor that they're buying out-of-date merchandise, they're getting bad service, and they're overpaying for what they're getting. And so as a manager, you want to somehow control the way the storefronts look. Storefronts like this say just the opposite. This is a beautiful storefront in a very small village that was established really just with paint and plywood. This is not an expensive storefront to do. Here's an even less expensive storefront in an alley where they just hung doors on the storefront, and at night, this is in an alley, they lock up the storefront. In the daytime, they have a beautiful looking store for a very inexpensive price. This is the typical retailer that we come across. This was a guy named Andy, and Andy's problem was that nobody knew he was open, and he wanted to have more open signs in his front window. And the mean city planner wouldn't let him put any more open signs in his window, so he was going to close. And Andy told me that his problem was that at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, people stopped coming into his store, and he couldn't be open any longer. And when we asked Andy what did he do at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he said, "Well, I close all my blinds because the sun heats up my Pepsi cooler in the window." But Andy never made the connection between closing his blinds at 12:59 and people stopped coming into the store at 1 o'clock. He never made that correlation. So we asked Andy if we could help him with the storefront, and we found that Andy had these challenges with the store. The door would fall on you when you opened the door. He had duct tape holding up his window. He had a dead mouse in the window. He had stacked chairs in the corner, dirty glass, and a dead plant. And all of these things tell the customer that you're going to get overpriced, you're going to buy low quality, and stay away from the store. The other problem with Andy was that nobody could tell what he sold. He didn't have a name on his store. And can you figure out what Andy sells? He's a deli operator. Man. So we pulled out the visual merchandising book, and we used all the retailing tricks we know about delis. And so we cleaned the glass, we painted the front door, we planted flowers in there. We moved the Pepsi machine to the back of the store so he didn't have to close the blinds. We put an awning on the front. You can get rid of the sun with an awning. It's an old trick, about a 400-year-old trick of using an awning. And then we moved the chairs in the back, and then we put little French cafe tables in the sidewalk because nobody wants to go in a restaurant that's empty. Everyone wants to go into a restaurant that's busy because it's probably got good food. And then the other trick for a restaurant is you only sit the beautiful people in the window, and the less beautiful people you sit in the back where nobody can see them. So that's why I always get stuck in the back of the restaurant. And we were able to triple Andy's sales for $200. And this is the kind of tactical, in the trenches system that the small retailers need. You should consider finding a local visual merchandising person and hiring them to work business by business by business. You can significantly increase sales for not a lot of money. The national retailers found that when they paint the back of the store a bright color, that more people go to the back of the store. This is called the buy zone. The buy zone is only between 2 and 5 feet high, and nobody will buy anything higher than 5 feet or lower than 2 feet off the store. There are dozens of tricks that you can apply for visual merchandising that at a tactical level you should apply to your retailers. Now what about tactical streetscape? Streetscapes, your sidewalks should be clean, freshly repaired. They should be power washed at least once a month, and they don't have to be necessarily expensive. A lot of cities just use concrete sidewalks and simple grass or simple shrubs. This is Worth Avenue in Worth Avenue in Palm Beach, Florida. This is the most expensive shopping district in the country, and they just have concrete sidewalks and grass. That's their streetscape, and a concrete sidewalk, a curb. It's not very expensive, but it's power washed all the time. This is Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, the second most expensive shopping district in the country, and it just has concrete sidewalks, very simple streetscape, but it's clean and it's well designed. It's important not to hide the storefronts with trees. This sort of shrub should not be planted in your downtown. You should use oaks and maples and lindens and basswoods, trees that grow tall. These trees hurt the retail sales. You shouldn't locate trees directly in front of the sign, in front of the store. This tree should have been located here. We believe in street trees. Street trees increase retail sales, but they should be strategically located not to hurt storefronts. Tenant mix. You should consider developing a merchandising plan for your village or your hamlet or your downtown, so ideally you know what sort of tenants go where. We did the tenant mix plan for Charleston, South Carolina. We've been consulting with Charleston for a long time. This is the mayor that just retired, Mayor Riley. This is the mayor for Niagara Falls, Canada, whom we introduced him to. And the mayor, in his case, decided that he wanted Charleston to sell the goods and services that people like to buy. And he said, even if it's a national chain, I want the goods and services that people buy on King Street rather than in the suburban mall. This is unusual. Most towns that we work with want no national chains at all. And that's, of course, up to you as a policy decision, but in that case, those retailers will locate out in the suburbs. We strongly believe that a downtown should have at least a third local retailers and no more than a third regional retailers, and no more than about 20-25% nationals, if any at all. If you have a national retailer, you should make sure that they locate the building in a historic way. I say that's okay to have a gap in your downtown as long as it has a nice looking building. It's wonderful to have independent retailers, like this could be an independent shoe store, but if it's a Banana Republic, and in this case this is in Savannah, this is a Banana Republic, we say it's okay as long as they're in a historic building and they look like a traditional retailer. Parking is very important for your downtown. Parking is probably the #1 thing that you should do to increase sales. These independent retailers totally depend on people being able to park and go into their storefront. If the storefront is full of cars, people will not likely go around the block 2 or 3 times looking for a space to park. They'll likely say, I'll come back tomorrow. We have found that every on-street parking space that's metered generates $175,000 a year in retail sales. Every metered parking space turns about 8 to 12 times per day, and that generates almost enough retail to support half the store. So every 2 metered spaces produces enough turnover to support 1 retailer, is another way of looking at it. Nobody likes parking meters. I don't like parking meters. There's no parking meters here in Lewiston. There's just 1 hour parking. However, we have found that in a town where parking meters are inappropriate in villages or hamlets, but in a town or in a city, they may be appropriate. And we have found that without parking meters, the store owner tends to park in front of their store all day long. Here's the store owner of this store. This is the store owner of that store, and that's the store owner of that store. In this Main Street, almost every parking space is taken up for 8 hours a day by the store owners or the lawyers or the hairdressers. And there's nowhere to park on street. The only way that we know to keep store owners and employees from parking in front of their store is with the parking meter. You can try things like chalking the tires, putting stickers on the windows and all of that, but generally it's unsuccessful. In one small town where I worked, they were chalking the tires, but the hairdressers would spray hairspray on the tire, and they found that the chalk would fall off a few minutes after you put the chalk on. So, they were outwitting the parking meter person. If you do go with paid parking, the paid parking should be inexpensive, and it should be in a meter that takes, an individual meter that takes credit cards and cell phones. Do not, under any condition, install kiosks. Kiosks are very confusing. They require that the shopper can read and follow directions. That's above the ability of most shoppers. So, and they find it very frustrating because it takes too much time. When possible, we prefer that you not have diagonal parking. Diagonal parking gives you more spaces per block, but it changes your street into a parking lot, and you lose that X factor. We prefer parallel parking when possible. Parallel parking also allows you to zigzag across the street and go shopping. Now, the problem with parallel parking is nobody knows how to parallel park, and it's sort of fun to watch people try, but aesthetically, if you want the X factor, we prefer the parallel parking. By the way, if you have parking meters, you should have free parking a block away. You must have at least 2 hours free parking in a deck or a surface lot, so that if you don't want to pay the 50 cents to park there, you can have free parking. Last year, the internet was accounted for about 8% of all retail sales. About 92% of all retail sales is still occurring in stores. The internet can help small independent retailers because they can advertise online and they can have a worldwide market. It's expected that the internet's going to grow to about 15% of sales in the next 10 years. But still, 92 cents of every dollar is occurring in a store. Many internet stores right now are opening real stores on Main Street. Amazon is opening 200 bookstores right now on Main Street because that's where they have higher sales. We recommend that you do something called a shopability study. A shopability study is where you look at zoning, streetscape, parking, signage, tenant mix. You look at everything in your downtown through the lens of the shopper. We do shopability studies for downtowns where we pretend we're a shopper. We try to figure out how to park. We look at the zoning codes. We look at your merchandising plan. We look at your lighting, signage. We look at every detail and report back what you can change to increase retail sales. It's expected that within the next 5 years that 25% of all malls will close. This is probably conservative. probably 40% of all malls are going to close in the next 5 years because they're losing their department stores. As malls close, the retailers tend to want to stay in that market. And the retailers right now in a current mall want to locate on Main Street. So if you have a mall in your market and it's going to close, you should consider talking to those retailers and recruit them to come into your Main Street. They want to go there, they just don't know how to get into the Main Street, they don't know how to do the business deal. A threat to downtowns right now are what's known as a lifestyle center or a town center. We have planned a lot of lifestyle centers. This is one we planned in Michigan. And we are very surprised to find that lifestyle centers are, even though they're fake downtowns, they're urban enough that it's pulling people away from the downtown to go into the lifestyle center. These lifestyle centers right now always put in a square. They're putting in handcrafted storefronts. They have free parking on the decks. They put in parking meters on the street, but they have free parking in the decks, and they have no panhandling, and they're very, very clean. And if you have a lifestyle center coming into your market, you may find it to be a bigger threat than a regional mall because they're urban enough. And you really need to sharpen your game if you're going to get a lifestyle center in your market. This is a book that I recently published called Urban Retail. It covers everything in my presentation. It's available online or in many bookstores. I would encourage you to consider getting this. These are other books that I've helped contribute to, including Doug Farr's new book. And we are the Gibbs Planning Group. We're based in Michigan. And again, you are more than welcome as a part of your fee for this session to email me for the next 6 months, and for no charge, I would be happy to correspond with you about issues. You can send me photos. You can just discuss an issue that you have with your downtown. I would encourage you to go to the Urban Retail Institute. If you are a Facebook person, we post articles almost every day that you would find interesting. And in 2 weeks, I'm teaching a 3-day class at Harvard. If you're interested in learning more, send me an email. I can send you a link. It's a 3-day class at Harvard that's open to the public. And for 3 days, I bring in guest speakers, and we go through all of these nuances: parking, signage, the X factor, visual merchandising, store planning, all of those sorts of issues. So thank you very much. I hope to hear from many of you in the next couple of weeks. Thank you. Thank you. I'd be happy to take some questions. Yes.
Do we have an after photo of the guy with the bad storefront?
I should put one in. I have one, yes. You know, it's funny, it doesn't look that much different. It's just that we got rid of the mouse, we got rid of the chairs, just little things. It's amazing what you can do for not much money. Yes.
Whenever I go to the development training, the growth in the next 10 to 15 years, 80% of retail is going to evaporate. And that's a message I'm getting consistently from one lecture to the next. It seems a little bit different from your numbers. Now, is there a nuance there?
Yeah, I disagree with that number strongly. The millennials are finding that buying a pair of pants online is boring. And they like the experiential factor that you get by shopping on Main Street. The millennials grew up in malls, and they're bored with malls. They're fascinated with Main Streets, especially Main Streets that have the X factor. So the new wave for retailer, and many retailers right now are repositioning themselves by opening on Main Streets. It's an experiential. Either a real Main Street or a fake Main Street with a lifestyle center.
So maybe those small closures,
Yes, yeah. Now, there are lots of retailers closing. This year, more stores have went bankrupt this year in June than entirely last year. And last year was a record for store closings. But new stores are opening. Warby Parker is opening hundreds of eyeglass stores on Main Street. Amazon's opening. The internet companies have found that when they open real stores, that internet sales go up by 30%. So you cannot replace the Main Street experience that you offer. You, though, have the responsibility of making it a nice experience. It can't be a fake strip center. It's got to be beautiful. Yes?
Great, thank you. This is a really wonderful presentation. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the best practices for second floor retail. Because in my city, our first floor retail is pretty much we're at capacity and it's filled. So we want to move to second floor.
There is no best practice for second floor retail, unfortunately. Shoppers are lazy. And they will not go upstairs. You can do second floor retailer for a store that's a two-story store. You can usually get them upstairs. But to have somebody go upstairs just to one store, it's very, very hard. And really the higher and better use is residential and office. The shoppers are really lazy. Yes? It's called Walloon Village, W-A-L-O-O-N, W-A-L-O-O-N, Walloon Village. It's a little town of 310 people in northern Michigan. We did the market study for them and we said, sorry, you have no demand. First time ever we did that. And so we built these little shops and they now have an hour and a half trade area for those little shops. And the nice thing is, a lot of those little retailers now are opening real stores. You know, the little toy store now is opening a real brick and mortar store. So we love incubating retail.
And it's kind of an organic process,
Well, it was not totally organic. We had my client bought the entire village. The village had been torn down. He bought the dirt. And his first step was to build the pop-up stores. Then he built real stores. He built real restaurants. But the first stop for 5 years was these pop-up stores. They worked really well, yes.
You mentioned the office worker, value.
Mm-hmm.
Have you studied residential, downtown resident sort of numbers?
Yes.
Because you didn't really mention about, one of the things that Lewiston, I think, has a problem is there's not a lot of consumers who actually live in the downtown. And that's one of the reasons some of its advantages have not been very successful because it doesn't have an organic sort of demand.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We estimate that every resident, every person in a downtown supports 10 square feet of retail directly. 10 square feet per person as a rule of thumb. But you will never, you need 8,000 houses for a grocery store. You'll never have enough people living downtown to support the retail. You do have to get people to drive there in addition to it. But if you can get people living downtown, it's a great plus, and it's really essential to get people living downtown. Yes.
Well, it said 8,000 households for a grocery store.
Yes.
8,000. Okay.
You need 8,000 households per grocery store as a rule of thumb. So all of these statistics are in my book, and if you email me, I'd be happy to send you that page out of the book. My book, unfortunately, is very expensive. It's worth it. It's very expensive. Yes.
What would you suggest is a good mix of retailers and food and beverage stuff?
Great question. What's a good mix between retailers and restaurants? The old rule of thumb was no more than 10% restaurants to retail. That's been changed now to 40% restaurants to retail. If you are revitalizing a small village or town or hamlet, your number one tenant should be a restaurant or a brew pub. That's the new silver bullet. So in a small village or town, you may have 60% restaurants and brew pubs, places like that, as your first step. In order to have retail, as a rule of thumb, you need at least 10 stores to have enough critical mass to be a shopping district. Anybody else? Yes.
Well, are there any trends that are going to change in terms of the time of day that people shop, what days of the week that people shop?
What time of day do people shop? Last year, 75% of all retail sales occurred on Sunday or after 6 o'clock at night. People can't shop anymore when they're working. Back in the Mad Men days of the 60s, you could take off and have a 3-martini lunch and go shopping. You can't do that today. So 70%, so if you have, and that's one of the challenges with small retailers, is they can't be open at night. So one of the nice things about a national or regional store is they have night and Sunday hours. It's one of the few nice things about it, that they're open at night. Yes?
We're a state with breweries and tasting rooms. Is there any comparable statistic about breweries with Starbucks kind of thing?
Microbreweries help bring people downtown on a regular basis. It does not affect retail sales. The breweries only help bookstores and outfitters for some reason. Birkenstock sales will go through the
Woolly socks too.
woolly socks, of course, yeah. But brew pubs are essential because they attract office and residential, and then that helps retail. Yes.
Time to time, we're going to see rural areas. Some of the first people in the door are the Family Dollars, the Dollar Generals, the big ugly structures. And once they're in there, are there any strategies dealing with that? As things kind of gentrify around them and they stay where they are?
Yeah, the question is, what about Family Dollar stores and those sorts of low-end stores? I'm fine with Family Dollar stores locating on Main Street as long as it's an attractive storefront. And it shouldn't be a cheap storefront. Even in Charleston, Mayor Riley went out and said, I want Family Dollar in Charleston. But it's a beautiful storefront because his residents like to shop there. And
I get that. I'm wondering what happens when you come into a community and it is what it is already. You're trying to kind of beautify around it. Are there any strategies to compel a business that you know of to kind of modernize, beautify?
an existing business? Yes. Yeah, let's say that you have some unattractive existing businesses. That's a great question. We like to see you have a storefront improvement grant program or low discount program. We also like you to, we think that you should require all storefronts to be upgraded to your new standard. You'll put in a storefront code and then require within 5 years all storefronts upgrade to that. They get rid of the tinted glass, they put it in a nice storefront that you code, and in exchange for that stick, offer them a carrot of a grant. So you may pay for 50 or 80% or give them a low interest loan. So we like to do a carrot and a stick. Probably out of time already. So I'm going to stay around and I'll take questions. Please, I encourage you to email me if you have questions. Consider attending my Harvard class in 2 weeks. Send me an email. I can send you a link to it. And good luck with your mission. I think the best way of stopping suburban sprawl is doing what you do. Every successful storefront in your main street is one less in the suburbs. And nothing against the suburbs, but they're just not that sustainable. Let's bring commerce back to the downtowns. Thank you very much.